All right, so a couple of days ago on Christmas Eve, the right-wing Republican governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, decided to channel his inner Antichrist and absolutely brutalize some migrants for no justifiable reason whatsoever. So, here from Common Dreams, Brett Wilkins. He says Abbott blasted for a cruel stunt as migrants are bussed to Kamala Harris's home on Christmas Eve. And they got a quote here from Joaquin Castro, who says, "How Christian of you, Greg Abbott. Being a heartless piece of shit isn't going to make you the next Republican president." And again, I mean, keep in mind, they're busing these immigrants here under absolutely brutal environmental conditions. We have had this massive winter storm over the last couple of days that I even felt down here in Georgia, where we didn't even face close to the brunt of this, but it was getting down to like 5 degrees at some points here down south. And we're talking about a situation where dozens of Americans have died as a result of this winter storm that has come in. And he's basically just deciding to send these migrants up to, Kamala Harris's house with absolutely no plan in place whatsoever for how they are actually going to be taken care of. So it's completely cruel, completely unnecessary, and some of the most anti-Christian shit you could possibly imagine. But let's get into some of the details here. They say human rights defenders condemned Texas Governor Greg Abbott and extremist Republicans' cruel values after several busloads of migrants were dropped off outside U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris's home in Washington, D.C. in sub-freezing temperatures on Christmas Eve. And they say for the second time since September, Central and South American migrants were bused from Texas to the vice president's residence at the U.S. Naval Observatory in the nation's capital. And according to reports, some of the asylum seekers were wearing only t-shirts and shorts as the mercury dropped to 18 degrees Fahrenheit. T-shirts and shorts. And we actually have a video here of what that looked like. So let's just go ahead and jump into this real quick. Yeah, so I mean, listen, the only reason why these people weren't just literally left out on the side of the street, on the sidewalk there, is because you did have some organizations who were ready for them to arrive and actually provided them with some much needed assistance. But we're going to hear from them here in a second. So let's just go ahead and continue. They say, while it is not known who ordered the migrants bused to the Capitol, advocates pointed fingers at Greg Abbott. And keep in mind, this is a guy who has like quite literally bragged about this in the past. So not exactly an unfair thing to assume that this was his doing, but they say the Republican Texas governor, along with GOP governors Ron DeSantis of Florida and Doug Ducey of Arizona, have bused more than 10,000 migrants to Democratic-led cities since April to protest what they falsely call the Biden administration's open border immigration policies. Okay, so we're going to circle back to this open border accusation here from many Republicans across the board. But I mean, keep in mind, the reason you know how this is just a complete political stunt and has absolutely nothing to do with the actual border security or improving our immigration system or making a valid point or something like that. I mean, you take this example of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Okay, he wasn't even just busing migrants who had come to Florida. Okay, he was taking migrants who were in Texas, bringing them over to Florida, and then shipping them up to Martha's Vineyard. Okay, he took migrants from a different state using taxpayer money to ship them to do this political stunt in Martha's Vineyard. And of course, it backfired straight in his face because the people up there actually welcomed them with open arms and gave them a bunch of supplies and gave them places to stay. So their political stunts don't seem to be working when, a lot of these Democratic-led cities who Republicans think are just going to be, complete and utter hypocrites, which they are to some degree, don't get me wrong. Democratic immigration policies are brutal as well as Republicans are, but to a different extent. But they did this thinking that people were going to reject them and, just leave them out on the sidewalk hanging, and they just didn't, right? You have community members, organizations that are coming together to actually show them a little bit of care, a little bit of decency, and give them some supplies. So it's definitely backfired to some extent. But I mean, keep in mind, the critique here is that the Biden administration is deploying open border immigration policies. I mean, they never really give any real details in terms of how he's going about doing this. I guess maybe because he didn't 100% complete Trump's border wall or something like that, even though Biden has been trying to give funds to continue building border fences and giving much more funding to ICE and the Customs and Border Protection and all of that. So I mean, listen, this is from Steven Semler's Substack. Okay, Biden budget boosts ICE funding by $18 million. Okay, so does this this look like an open borders policy kind of guy? I mean, we're talking about Joe Biden here, okay? Anybody who does an honest assessment of either his career while he was in the Senate or, his career as the vice president under Obama, who was literally named the deporter in chief for a pretty good reason, right? Or whether it's during his own administration, okay? Anybody who understands who Joe Biden is could not possibly in good faith say that he supports open border policies, okay? If anything, he's too brutal. If anything, he's not actually pushing aggressively enough to overhaul our legal immigration processes, okay? There's a reason why people are making these extremely dangerous journeys from Central and South America to come up to the United States through these pathways that they have been, okay? Through these illegal pathways. The reason for that, okay, is because we have not provided adequate legal pathways for them to come into this country, okay? They wouldn't just be doing that and making these dangerous treks where some people are exploited and brutalized and they die during these trips. They wouldn't be doing that and subjecting their families, their children to these long journeys if that wasn't the only fucking option, okay? So I mean, just keep this in mind. Keep the broad scope of who Joe Biden is. This is a guy, okay, just as one example on some of his immigration and deportation policies, okay? This is a guy who is still to this day supporting and backing a completely illegitimate president down in Haiti who was directly implicated in the assassination of the former president of Haiti, okay? Doing deals with this government specifically so that he can continue expelling and deporting Haitian asylum seekers back to this country as they are facing insane levels of political instability and insecurity, okay? Deporting these people back to dangerous situations in Haiti, okay? That's who Joe Biden is, all right? So the notion that this is some sort of an open borders policy kind of guy, where the fuck are you getting this from? Okay, it's not based in reality on any front that you could possibly look at this in an honest way. Okay, so they continue. They say, Amy Fisher, again, some of these organizations who are actually working on the ground to provide them with some resources, they say, Amy Fisher, a volunteer with the Migrant Solidarity Mutual Aid Network, told CNN that her group was prepared for the migrants' arrival, saying the DC community has been welcoming buses from Texas anytime they've come since April. Christmas Eve and freezing cold weather is no different, she said. We are always here welcoming people with open arms. So again, it seems like a little bit of backfiring here because you have some organizations on the ground who are perfectly willing to welcome these people into their communities, okay? So they say progressive activist Jen Kaufman tweeted that the only reason these families were outside so briefly is because of the work of the DC Migrant Solidarity Mutual Aid Network, and this was intended to be a cruel stunt by Greg Abbott, but people are working around the clock to treat these families with the dignity that they deserve, she added. Okay, so massive credit to the people who are actually on the ground providing these people with the resources that they need to be able to not just literally sit out on the curb and freeze to death as they are arriving to this country. So, massive credit and solidarity to all the people who are actually putting in the work on the ground. But just to touch back on this idea of this statement here from Joaquin Castro about how Christian of you, Greg Abbott, I mean, this goes across the board with the entirety of the evangelical movement, with the entirety of a lot of these right-wing Republican reactionaries, and all of these people who pretend like they are like the most hardcore Christians and observers of, Jesus Christ's teachings, okay? It goes across the board for virtually all of their policies. They are always the complete antithesis of anything that Jesus Christ actually preached about, okay? And so, obviously I've talked about this on this channel before many times, but I personally am an atheist, right? I don't believe in any of the various God claims. I don't believe they've met their burden of proof, so I don't believe in them, right? But at the same time, I did go to a private Catholic school from kindergarten through 12th grade, right? So I was going to church on a regular basis. We were reading the Bible. We were learning about Jesus Christ and the message that he had, okay? And, obviously I'm no biblical scholar or anything like that, but just the basics about who Jesus Christ was as a person or as a preacher or as, some sort of a lesson, some sort of a transporter of the lessons of God, okay? Just understanding the basics of who Jesus Christ was. He was a non-white refugee who frequently talked about how it would be virtually impossible for a rich man to get into heaven. Okay, he said it would be more difficult for a rich man to get into heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Somebody who explicitly said that you should give up all of your possessions to the poor and the vulnerable in order to follow in his footsteps. Okay, somebody who was like going around being best friends with sex workers. Okay, and somebody who, as pointed out here by Killer Mike, was killed by the state. Right? He says, never forget in the story of Jesus, the hero was killed by the state. Okay, so Jesus Christ, his actual story, the things that he actually said, right, which obviously I don't agree with nearly anything close to everything in the Bible. I think that the God of the Bible was largely like a genocidal maniac, but put all of that aside, right? put a lot of the fucked up shit in the Bible aside, what Jesus was saying for the most part, and his entire story, is the complete antithesis to everything that the modern Republican and modern evangelical movements stand for. Okay, whether it goes for their economic policies, their immigration policies, their foreign policy, all of the above. Okay, they're the complete opposite of everything that Jesus was actually teaching. So, I mean, again, obviously it's kind of a cliche at this point. It's a often repeated and honestly outdated thing to just say, oh, Republicans are hypocrites on all of these issues. It's like, yeah, no shit, they're obvious. They pick and choose which parts of the Bible they want to focus on. Obviously, they're obsessed with any verse that is nominally, homophobic or anti-gay, right? They focus on different sections that they misinterpret to say that abortion is something that we should be completely outlawing in this country, even though the Bible gives explicit definitions on how to conduct an abortion. But, put all of that aside, right? The hypocrisy is obvious. That's the easiest critique that you could possibly give. But at the end of the day, I mean, understand these types of things that they're doing when it's, busing migrants to all of these various places around the country, it's just a political stunt. Okay, we've seen this for decades from the right wing within this country and from many liberals as well. Okay, they want to convince their right wing base of supporters that immigrants are coming into this country, as Trump said, they're criminals, they're rapists, and some of them presumably are good people. No, okay, and as many other Republicans say, they're coming in to steal your jobs, they're going to destroy this economy. I mean, all of this is complete bullshit, and they know that it's bullshit. In fact, many of these Republican states, okay, especially a state like Texas, large portions of their economy rely on illegal immigrants to do a lot of the grunt work, okay? Their economies are propped up by these migrants that are coming in, okay? So the idea that, like, they have some sort of a principled stance against immigrants or something like that, it's completely fucking ridiculous. They're obvious hypocrites when it comes to this issue of immigration. But, I mean, on top of that, at the end of the day, the lesson here is that we need to actually overhaul our legal immigration process, right? We need to make it much more simple for people to come into this country by any economic measure you want to look at. For the most part, immigrants coming into this country are a massive economic boost, okay, in the aggregate. And so the idea that, like, this is something we should be trying to push back against, or militarizing the border, or keeping upping the funding for ICE and Customs and Border Patrol, I mean, it's not going to be effective in the long run, number one, because you're completely ignoring all of the reasons why people are coming to the southern border in the first place, which is largely because of U.S. actions throughout the last couple hundred years in Central and South America, backing far-right fascist dictatorships, toppling democratically elected left-wing governments, using CIA-backed death squads in order to terrorize local populations, indigenous people, whether it's the neoliberal economic policies that we have forced on them, extracting their resources for the sake of U.S. Multinational corporations, or exploiting their labor. The culmination of all of those different things, along with a whole host of other factors as well, are why so many of these people are facing the type of political instability or economic instability that causes them to make these dangerous journeys in the first place. So there are so many different lessons that could be had here in terms of the United States laying our hands off a lot of these, Central and South American countries and allowing them and helping them to actually flourish and to actually grow their economies in ways that benefit average working class people, that pull up the most impoverished and the most vulnerable people within these societies, as somebody like Jesus might want us to do. There are so many different things that we could do to fix this problem at a fundamental level. But at the end of the day, honestly, neither Democrats nor Republicans are really interested in ending a lot of that exploitation, or ending a lot of the expropriation of resources and the exploitation of their labor forces, and the honestly U.S. continued infiltration and destabilizing tactics that we use in a lot of these countries. Neither party has any interest in stopping that, because both parties are supported by the same corporate interests, the same militaristic and police interests that funnel money into both political parties' campaign coffers. So I mean, it's like you have some nominal differences between Republicans and Democrats on the issue of immigration. Again, Democrats, to some extent want to treat migrants with somewhat of a tiny modicum of dignity and respect, and move our immigration policy towards a much more effective and efficient, a pathway for a lot of these people to come into the country. But, if you are a Republican and you're supporting the policies that people like Greg Abbott want to support, I mean, it's the same exact concept of increasing our police budgets here domestically. It's the same exact thing goes for border security as well. You can militarize the police, you can militarize ICE, you can militarize Border Patrol as much as you want, but people are still coming to this country, and they're coming to this country for a lot of things that we have done in the past that have led to the current situation that they are facing, where they feel the need to have to make this journey. So I mean, again, there's so many different lessons that could be taken from this. Will Republicans like Greg Abbott ever learn any of those lessons? Will Republicans like Greg Abbott or Ron DeSantis ever actually read the Bible or the story of Jesus Christ and the lessons of what he had to say? No, I highly doubt it. They're probably just going to continue continue exploiting this issue of immigration in order to brutalize migrants for absolutely no justifiable reason whatsoever, continue pretending as if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are somehow in support of open border policies, and continue to worsen this problem and not address it in any serious or genuine capacity whatsoever, so that they can continue to exploit it for their own political gain.
Everyone is saying good Politic guy has the best Politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying